What are you, okay, since we're doing the threes, and if you want a fourth, you can. You said you have some rankings. Do you like the top three right now?
Yeah, I would probably say I would definitely go with Penn Station at number one. Okay. And then there's a restaurant near us called Casa's is number two. And I'd probably go with Jersey Mike's number three.
The 13, so, the number 13. That's right.
That's so funny.
I do know the number. Yes,
that's embarrassing. That is embarrassing.
Is it? Is it though?
I
don't know if that's embarrassing. We just connected over a sandwich. I think that's great.
And if any one of those places want to sponsor, we'd be open to it.
Oh, I'm sure Jersey Mike's is listening to this right now. Welcome back to the Ministry Without Hating It podcast, a ministry of Odyssey Haven coaching and counseling dedicated to the pursuit of answering the question, is it possible to do ministry without hating it? We have a theory that it just might be. Brenton, what's going on?
Yo, it is a wet and whatever day out here, and yet I'm having so much fun in our home studios, our studios that we get across from, every part of Indiana and Iowa.
So you say that without much context, and he's referring to AJ and I are snowed in. We had a mini semi-blizzard. It was not quite a blizzard, but they canceled everything here and also canceled our evening stuff. And so, yeah, I'm in my basement today.
Yeah, but you sound great.
I do.
Yeah.
It's all that extra sleep I got this morning because, that's the one benefit of snow days out here. And if you're not in the Midwest and you don't understand that, I'm sorry. I did not grow up with snow days. Growing up in Nevada, we don't even know what snow was a whole lot of the time. And, getting into the Midwest, that's the experience my children have. And when they think it might be, it's like, it's kind of like waiting for the lottery. Are we going to get that or whatever? And sure enough, we hit the lottery this morning. So
and in our podcast today, we hit the lottery.
Oh, what a great segue!
Yeah, you like that?
So you, set us up. Tell us what we got.
We have my friend Johnny McCallister, who came on today and just gave us a great interview. A pastor to pastors,
a friend to pastors. Yeah.
And I'm thankful to call him my friend, and he came on and joined us today and really just knocked it out of the park.
Yeah. This is, he'll talk about this a little bit. He doesn't have necessarily formal training on a lot of things that he's doing, but he has the life and the ministry experience of being able to walk with others through that. And that just really shines through in everything he says here. Super practical, simple, but also gets right to the heart of things of where, statistically, as he points out, most ministry leaders are at right now. And so this is they're all great episodes. This is also just another great episode, and really excited for you guys to hear it. And so I think we've done enough talking in our snow day. Let's just get to that episode. And so we are excited for you to enjoy our conversation with Johnny McCallister. Well, it is our privilege and pleasure to welcome Johnny McCallister to the Ministry Without Hating podcast. Thank you for being here with us today.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. It's great to see you guys. Glad to be with you.
We like to start off, Johnny, by asking some questions that have nothing to do with ministry, but need to be asked anyways. And so the one we like to start off with is describe yourself for us in 3 words.
Oh, it's so funny. The 3 words that pop in my mind, because I am from West Virginia. I remember we used to have a little thing would say, "What are you good for?" And you're like, "Good for nothing." So I thought, I don't think good for nothing sounds very good, does it? No, I think 3 words that describe me really are, pastor, dad, and husband probably are the 3 words that describe me. And because it's only 3 words, I can't say child of God. So I would say,
I mean, that is 3 words. That's
that
literally
is
3 words.
that
right
is
there.
that
Yeah.
is true.
Yeah.
That is true. So I am very thankful for my family and for what the Lord's over the years, what the Lord has led me in. I'm just thankful to be here.
I think back when I haven't used it recently, but I had back when it was Twitter. I think those same 3 words were what I used to describe myself: pastor, dad, husband.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting.
You know what? Actually, I think mine did too, but I also added on there geek at the very end of it.
Yeah, because we could do more than 3, but yeah, something along
apologies.
Yeah, something like that.
And we'll allow you the 4th one that is 3 words in itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm good with that. I'm good with that.
Not, yeah. We'll not go with good for nothing. So,
Good for
yeah, okay.
Good for. You know, what's interesting to me. So we've been asking this question just for not real long, actually, maybe probably a little over a year to our guests. I think I have to probably check the tape. I think that's the first time I've heard somebody not use like descriptive words, but more like identity type words, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's funny you say that because I was thinking like 3 words like I want to be known as someone who loved well. So loving, and I want to be empathetic with people, no matter who they are in my life. And I also, I think another description would be a leader. So I think those 3 things are, so I did think in your way. I did. I just went with, I went with what describes me, maybe.
Yeah.
Not the aspirations of where we're headed.
Yeah.
Or where you're headed, but yeah, it's good.
Oh, I think it's great. I think it's great. I think it actually speaks a lot about you already, which is awesome. So
I don't know. This one might speak a lot more about him. What's your perfect sandwich?
Oh man, it's obviously, seriously, like, I don't know what's wrong with me, but ever since I discovered the Italian sub, it's like wherever I go, I cannot go off of it. Yeah. So whether I go to, a chain or whether it's a restaurant, I love the Italian sub. I am on a mission to find the world's greatest Italian sub. Huh. So like whether I'm at Penn Station or it's like my wife knows what to get me if she's out someplace, wherever we go, if it's a sandwich place. And so, yeah, the Italian sub.
Have you found the perfect one yet?
No, I do have probably a list of favorites and how they score top to bottom. So yeah, but I don't think I've had the perfect Italian sub yet.
Yeah. Interesting. You know what? I actually relate to that because I feel like I discovered the Italian a little bit later in my life as well. And I look back at what I used to order. I'm just like, that was pretty basic. And then, you move up to the Italian and you're right. There's different iterations all over the place. But I'm with you. That's been kind of my go-to a lot as well.
Yeah.
What are you? Okay, since we're doing the 3s, and if you want a 4th, you can. You said you have some rankings. Do you like the top 3 right now?
Yeah, I would probably say I would definitely go with Penn Station at number 1.
Okay.
And then there's a restaurant near us called Casa's is number 2, and I'd probably go with Jersey Mike's number 3.
The 13, the number 13. That's right.
That's so funny.
I do know the number.
Yes. That's embarrassing. That is embarrassing.
Is it?
I know that.
Is it though? I don't know if that's embarrassing. I mean, we just connected over a sandwich. I think that's great.
And if any one of those places want to sponsor, we'd be open to it.
Oh, I'm sure Jersey Mike's is listening to this right now. Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah. Would you rather travel back in time to meet your ancestors or into the future to meet your descendants?
It's so interesting because I did do the ancestry thing not too long ago, like a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And what I discovered was just simply amazing. And this is me like trudging through it. So I'm not like some, my great grandmother lived with us when I was growing up. And so I already had some start on like, oh, our descendants came through the Cumberland Gap and up the Big Sandy River and settled in Western West Virginia and all that stuff. But it was so interesting because evidently there's a guy named Richard McCallister who would be my great, I think it's at least 4 greats, grandfather. He settled in West Virginia, and his house, so his father was James, and so he is the second generation who lives there. Ireland bought his house, disassembled this thing that was built like in early 1800s and shipped it back to Ireland. And at the American Museum in Ireland, there is the McCallister House.
Huh.
So you can go there and see the McCallister House. And that is I think it might be 5 greats. My great grandfather. So yeah, I'm very interested in it. But as I think about, the question, I think I know enough. I don't really need to know that much more. There was wonderful, I'm thankful and everything. There was some warts back there. So I'm like, and interestingly enough, I didn't know this before I did it, but I had a great grandfather on my dad's side, and I'm looking in this thing, and it says that he was one of 17 kids, and this is during the Civil War, and 3 of his brothers fought for the Confederacy, and 3 of his brothers fought in the Union.
Wow.
And there might have even been a battle like in Kentucky where 2 brothers actually were present on opposing sides. And I always thought, brother against brother and everything, but I found that out about my family too. Wow. So I feel like I know enough.
Yeah.
So I would definitely probably go to the future to find out about descendants because, I kind of traveled back a little bit and found out enough to, I know enough.
I'm good.
So.
Yeah.
Huh. All right. So you get to work with a lot of leaders. Do you have a personality test that you favor over others? Is that something that you employ, or is there something different that you like?
We employed, as a pastor, we did employ some personalities sometimes, but I'm going to shoot straight with you and say that I think they can be helpful, but mostly they annoy me. Because I will say, I know that I'm a high I, and my Enneagram, I'm a 6.
Oh,
okay. I know enough to probably make me dangerous, but I just, what's annoying to me is somebody spending, like an hour, especially even if it was an interview, and they would say, "Oh, you're a high I, aren't you?" Or "You're this and that." I just think that is such, there's so much more to people than just that. And so I'm not a big buyer on it. And I really think there's just so much more. Now, I know that I think it was Saddleback that came out with the shape profile, where, you history, abilities, personality. And I think I like that approach because your experiences and, your spiritual gifts and all those things kind of combined to make you who you are. So I'm down with that, but I'm not a big person. People are always kind of around me and they're just saying, "What's your Enneagram?" And I'm like, I always feel like I don't know the language. I don't even know what it says about me that I'm a 6. I don't even know what that means.
I'm a 6, but we can have a sidebar later if you'd like, and I can.
Yeah.
This is me and Chad all the time, because he's like, "You should really check this out." I'm like, I think I'm doing okay. And I know a lot about me, and I'm into self-discovery. I want to know, but I don't know that I need to be categorized, and yet I know.
Well, hold on a second.
Yeah,
categorized.
Yeah.
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
Hold on a second.
Don't put me in a box. I can be anything. Holy Spirit's with me, and He has all the gifts. And so one day I might be solid 3, and the next day I might be into the 8s, or it could just be a categorization.
So for people who know the Enneagram, none of what you just said is possible. So
okay, good.
You can't shoot around these different numbers like that.
Yeah, okay.
I will say this. And on some ways, I do actually agree with you when it comes to personalities, because I often find, especially for some people, it can actually be a justification. Well, this is just why I am what I am, that kind of a thing. Yeah. That does bother me as well. If I had one, and we have talked about it a lot on here, the Enneagram was a bit of a game changer for me. And I tell people it's just because it's, for me, it shows me what I could be, whether that's good or bad. And because it kind of goes back to, motive and the reason why you do what you do and how you can grow, that kind of a thing. And so I agree with you, but it can definitely be a useful tool, but it can also be something that people...
I've been with leaders, anytime in the church, you're always shoulder to shoulder. And sometimes you're trying to gather something amongst a group. Sometimes it's search teams. Sometimes it's like, just a staff or whatever. And those things are good to know. I feel like there are some folks that I've just been around some folks that they just cannot get off of it. And then once they find out that that informs them everything about you. I just don't think that's what is everything about you.
Oh, I agree.
So, I found people that lean so much into it that so forgive me. I evidently have had a bad experience along the way, and it's coming out of me.
If that's what we need for this time, to process, we can do
more
that.
than your number. Okay.
That's right. Yeah,
You're more than your number.
That's right. Well, and here's the other thing. I'm real big. I've actually used it in any kind of development. It's a program that's called Kazone, and that's the Hebrew word for vision, and it does a lot of the same things you were just talking about. It takes your personal history, your gift mix, your passions, all these things, and how the Lord is creating that vision for what He's created in you, and how you move forward within that. And you can't overlook any of those things. That is the holistic who God created you to be. And so I'm with you on that. I don't think there's a one set way. And yes, you are more than a number, or if you're Brenton, you're more than 3 numbers. So not possible. Yep. Not possible. All right, let's pivot away from this a little bit. Then, what do you find exciting, or what are you looking forward to right now?
Well, I'm at an interesting place in my life because, when I was years ago, I was brand new, serving at a church here in Indiana, and I had one that was going into college, one going into high school, one going into grade school, and one coming into the world.
Oh, wow.
It's like so funny. I had a friend of mine who said, "You have 4 firstborn children. What in the world?"
Really?
They're so spread out. And that is now processing at a different stage in my life. So I'm really excited about the different things that are happening. I have a son who's going to graduate from the Kelley School of Business from IU this year. I have a daughter who's dating a young man who up in Wisconsin that is on a church staff and an engineer, and they're pretty exciting. I have a daughter who's, she's works for the corporate YMCA, and then I have a son who's 16. So I'm very excited about what the Lord's doing in our family. I'm very thankful for what I'm doing at Pastors in Prayer. Pastors in Prayer is a ministry that began with my pastor, who pastored me over these 34 years. I've known him all these years. Mm-hmm. And he started this ministry in his retirement. And he pastored me and was the person. So that ministry impacted me greatly because he was set aside to really meet with pastors. And that happened. That all happened because he was wanting that there were so many pastors who wanted to talk to him and just sit with him and listen to him. And how do you do this? That his schedule was filling up so much that he just transitioned into doing that full time.
Oh, wow.
And so the ministry allows me to set aside to encourage, and in some places there's coaching, in some places there's mentoring, and others there is like consulting or helping pastors in different ways. I also often even have said that, I am continuing a legacy of being a friend to pastors. And so, that continuing legacy was from my pastor. And then I have my good friend, Kevin Duval, it was that for me too. He's been another guy I've walked shoulder to shoulder with. And it was the person who's in charge of it. Now he's moving kind of out of that full time, but I've benefited from this ministry. And so now I'm the executive director of that ministry. I'm pretty excited about that because it's been just over a year I've been doing this. It's very different from my leadership over the years in the church. I've only gotten a paycheck from a church my whole life. That was all I'd known after I began ministry. But yeah, I'm very excited about my time with pastors, whether it's one-on-one or with groups.
So I want to put a pin in that and come back to that in just a second. But I'm curious because you set us up there. You said, this is relatively new for you. You've only ever done, it sounds like, vocational ministry. So tell us your ministry story. How have you found yourself where you're at?
Yeah. I met my wife when I coordinated an event in my hometown. I worked in the music business, and I coordinated an event back in my hometown because the church had kind of languished, and I always had a heart for my hometown. And and my wife came from Indiana. I lived in Nashville, and this was all back in West Virginia. So we met in West Virginia, and I met my wife at that event. By the way, the name of that event was Come Together.
Okay.
Come Together. Yeah. Believe it or not. So, so after we met, we got married, and I was in the marketplace for a couple of years, and that was probably pretty good. But after that, I was able to go back. I was invited back by my home church in West Virginia to be in student ministry for about 5 years. And we started this ministry called The Garage and everything. And then after
sounds like a good youth name for sure.
Yeah, it's great. It's still going, believe it or not. It's still going. They're on their third building because they've had to tear down. They're so old and dilapidated. They've torn it. They finally built one called The Garage.
Yeah.
Anyway,
you would think that would lend to The Garage. That would be perfect.
Oh, it was crazy, you guys. I mean, we had bats, rats. We had everything.
Nice.
It was just unbelievable. I got stories, but that was an incredible experience. But when I first got married, I was in the marketplace, and Smitty and Amy were coming to the Coliseum here in Fort Wayne. And
Smitty, is that
Michael W. Smith?
Okay, yeah, and Amy Grant.
Amy Grant, yeah, they were at the Coliseum, and we had just gotten married, Sherry and I, and they had all been at the wedding, and so Smitty was my best man, and so I'm going to the Coliseum, and that's where I met after. I lived in Fort Wayne. This was only probably about 45 days after I'd gotten married. And we had him over for dinner. And when I'm driving back over to the Coliseum, backstage, he's like, my former pastor in Nashville had called Bob Yauberg, who was the guy I had not met yet here in Fort Wayne. And he's like, you got to meet this guy. This guy, his name is Bob Yauberg. You got to meet him. And so I met him, and I started the relationship with him. I told him I wanted to be in ministry, and that's when he became sort of my pastor. So even when I was in West Virginia, he was my pastor. And then they invited me when they needed a youth pastor. They said, hey, I remember we prayed for you. Why don't you come back? And so I was at Broadway, and all my story is a place of just invitation. So I was, for 18 years, I was the associate pastor. I always said to people, I was always Aaron and never Moses. I was sort of the associate for all those years until I was 45 years old. I was in youth ministry, and it was incredible. I mean, hundreds of kids, got to baptize dozens of kids, and it was a great experience. And then in 2009, I became a senior pastor. And for almost 14 years, over 13 years, I was a senior pastor in Columbia City, Indiana. And so my story has been a story of kind of just being in incredible churches and a variety of churches. I'm sort of a mutt. Like, you can't pin me down to a denomination. Like, I've been at Christian churches where they're taking communion every week. There's a Methodist church that was, I don't know, just very interesting. Wasn't your kind of predictable about what it looked like, and then but all of them look like non-denominational churches, basically. And so I finally, over the years, I served as a senior pastor. I've just been so thankful for the people that poured into my life and the experiences I've had, and I've been able, kind of had a front row seat for a long time to see how people did things. There's churches of like 1,500. There's a church of 2,500, but then at Sunrise, it was a church of probably about, we grew to about 600 or 700 people from about 350 while I was there, but just incredible variety of experiences and actually learning from a lot of different people and just having a lot of different experiences over the years. And that, along with people investing in me by taking me to conferences and stuff like that, has just, it's kind of landed me to where I am. And again, out of being a senior pastor, Kevin and Bob both really felt like I would be the one that they would pass the baton to. And so that kind of happened organically as well.
It's really, it's interesting to me when I hear you say describe your journey as that of invitation. And that stands out to me because I feel like I share somewhat similar within that. In fact, I can think of most every assignment that I've found myself in was not something that I had envisioned or had even honestly probably wanted. It was just kind of I have said before, it's been a series of surprises. God just keeps surprising me in these places. Yeah, you would agree with that, Brenton. Not just for me, but for you as well.
Yeah.
But how
I think one of the things, here's something that, again, my mentor all these years, going to him, and he was much older, and I would talk to Bob, and I'd be like, this is like when I was like 35 years old. And I would say, Bob, I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know if God's, maybe moving me on, or whether, is this where I should be? And I don't know. And he would look at me and he'd say, Johnny, if I'd only done what I'd planned to do, I would have missed the best God had for me.
Yeah.
And so he was, he was always very wise in realizing that my story is the story of God being very gracious. I'm the youngest of four from Canova, West Virginia. I'm not in a family business here. No pastors in our past, kind of thing. And it's really been amazing to see God at work and to see him do incredible things. And it's really truly been an incredible adventure, so.
Yeah. Wow. So I'm curious then with that journey, how has that shaped, and maybe I should just ask this flat out first. I mean, how do you define ministry these days? And how has your journey shaped that?
I have always, to me, it gets back some of the biblical meaning, even from the origins of the word, of just serving. I think there's you're serving, Lord, I'm serving you. And over the years, I always tried, especially with my teams of people, like, when I was student ministry, I started, when we were at the garage, by the way, the name of the coaches was the pit crew. They were members of the pit crew. And we had awesome. The oil change uniform. We had those, and we had patches with our names on it, the whole thing, man.
You guys went all in.
We did. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's incredible.
So whenever I would talk to them, I'd always try to, one of the things in serving is we want to make sure you keep your ministry centered on, this is about the Lord. This is, we're doing a spiritual. It's not just a club. We're not just doing the Boys and Girls Club here. All right. We're serving, and you're not doing me a favor. Okay. I mean, yes, you're wonderful and I love you very much, but I don't want to set this up to where like, hey, could you come here and save me and help me? Because I really need help. I wanted folks to be full in their calling. So I try to keep it like, hey, you're serving the Lord. And yes, we're serving one another, and we are serving students. Yes, that's what we're here for. But in it, and so I think keeping ministry centered, that it's a spiritual. Like I even tell a lot of younger pastors, I'm like, hey man, remember, you're a spiritual leader. You're not just a leader. And you're not, and yet, I don't want anybody to I don't want to be the word police. Okay. I don't want to be that, but I do think it's important that, especially younger pastors, really understand that, even as we speak to people. So like, for example, when I wrote letters through the week or anything like that, I would always say, I try to make sure that I'd say, thank you for all you're doing in serving the Lord. It wasn't like, hey, thank you. We've really got a good thing going here, don't we? I mean, it wasn't that. It was trying to keep it in that spiritual leadership, because I do think there's a lot of pressures on like a new youth pastor or a new, any kind of new children's pastor. There's a lot of pressure to perform, to have results, to produce fruit. Hey, we didn't pay you to have, 4 kids here. We want to see it grow and all that stuff. And before you know it, you're just like, you're trying to figure out how to get a crowd and best practices and all that. And I just think it all kind of starts with, we have to remember that this ministry is serving the Lord. Yeah. And it's just hard. Life is complex. And sometimes I think it's hard to keep first things first.
Yeah. I love that, because it actually, it's simple, but not simplistic. There's so much you can pull just from saying that, and just the obedience portion alone. And thank you for saying, that is the keeping first things first, because it's not all these other results, right? I did air quotes there. That we look to. That's how we gauge that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing.
That's right.
And I just think that's profound. That's great. That's great. So you kind of talked a little bit about this, and we've come to the spot of now, like, so defining ministry, it's serving the Lord, but then also you had mentioned being a friend to pastors, and that's the legacy that you're carrying on with Pastors in Prayer. Talk to us a bit more about that for people who are not familiar with this ministry, because your mission statement, I wrote this down. Said encouraging, supporting, and praying for pastors in their calling in ministry. So what does that look like, or how does that play out in the role that you have now?
Well, for me, first of all, that the paradigm of what Pastors in Prayer is, it's been relational. And so trying to meet people where they are. So some of my phone calls are, especially after I get to know someone, some of them are 411 calls, and then some of them are 911 calls.
Okay, yeah.
And so people that are contacting me, there might be a variety of reasons why they're contacting me. And so for me, I'm meeting them where they are. Now, this is where it gets a little tough, guys. And I just have a lot of learning to do and everything, even inside this role. But, when you're the only guy with a microphone on and there's 1,000 people there on a Sunday morning and you're the only one who gets to talk into it, it's like, it's different than, well, my wife over there has always told me, hey, Johnny, you need to talk less and listen more. Okay. 2 ears, 1 mouth. Okay. Just, dial in here a little bit. So I think I'm trying to, especially in this role, is first of all, do a better job of listening. And so I meet folks where they are, and then I need to listen to their story, where they are, what they're doing, what's going on, find out context, find out, where they are in their life. And then from there, trying to also, there's the folks that I'm literally coaching. So what does a coach do? A coach says, hey, what do you want to talk about today? That's kind of classic coaching.
Mm-hmm.
But then also there's some resources that I kind of lean on a little bit, where I'm like, okay, so what if we're at a blank spot and we don't know what to say? So I've come up with some tools to find places where we can talk about how things are going. So, and then I'm trying to I said it a little earlier, but I'm trying to continue that legacy of being a friend to pastors. So, yes, I do coaching. Yes, I consult. Yes, I even do, things with whole staffs, and I meet with CEOs of nonprofits. Some of them have worldwide impact.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them do that, but I'm realizing it's very relational. And for me, I'm also trying to grow in my listening and understanding, and then doing a better job at kind of talking. But I also, the one thing I knew in my next experience was that I wanted to leverage my years of experience to a younger generation too. So it's a combination, because I can be very empathetic. There's not a lot that a pastor could tell me that I probably haven't seen or heard or experienced myself.
Yeah.
And so I want to make myself available to folks. And then sometimes it is just as much as like, there was a young man in Phoenix that is a youth pastor, and he was kind of struggling with some stuff. And I was like, well, let me shoot you a couple of job descriptions. Cause he was like, I don't have any job descriptions or anything. I was like, let me shoot you some. So I had that, I'm trying to resource folks too. So in that way, I'm trying to serve them. And yeah, I want to serve them, but be used by the Lord to leverage and empathize, and then walk with them too. And then know that I'm praying for them. So, I try to reach out to folks and remind them I'm praying for them as well.
Yeah. So it's more than just, so traditional coaching, you set an appointment, that's it. It's what do you want to talk about today? Let's help move you forward, and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It's continued care and follow up even beyond that, it sounds like.
And it's interesting because I know that there are a lot of consulting firms, and there's lots of coaching, and there's sometimes where I bump into folks and I'm like, man, is everybody doing this?
Yes,
kind
exactly.
of thing.
Yeah.
But, I am unique in that there are folks that are giving to our ministry, and they're setting me aside to do this so that I can, I don't have to monetize it. I don't have to, I'm meeting with this. I just met this past week with just graduated from college in December, and he's starting brand new ministry, student ministry, middle school guy at a fairly large church. And he's like, He just wrote me and is like, could you help me? I need somebody to walk with me. I was like, yeah, let's do it, and so that guy, he's not going to, hey, I don't try to monetize it. I'm going to say, hey, I'm so much a month. And, so I'm very thankful that it's supposed to be coming out of a heart of walking with, not just, hey, you're paying me for services.
Yeah.
And so that does make us Pastors in Prayer unique.
Yeah, no, that's definitely unique.
Especially for guys that might not be struggling financially. It's one of the big deals.
Exactly. I was just about to say that. Yeah, because, I know I do some coaching as well, and it's primarily with ministry leaders, and I know what they don't have, you know what I mean? And so I think that is definitely a unique perspective, and actually point of attack, if you want to call it that you're able to employ. I think that's great. It's great. Is it just you, or do you have like a team that?
It's just me. Well, like I said, the gentleman, my pastor was Bob, and then he retired, and then a gentleman by the name of Kevin Duval, he's with Pastors in Prayer as well, and he did this after Bob for about a little over 10 years he's been doing it. And, interestingly enough, as Kevin came to me, his wife was about, hey, I think I'm not going to do this forever. Hey, I want you, maybe you're the one that's going to pass the baton to. His wife was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And so in my first year with the ministry, Kevin, who's really ministered to so many different pastors, both in our area, and he's also with Standing Stone, where he just ministers to a lot of different folks. He lost his wife this past September, and I had the honor of being a part of that funeral. And so in my first year, Kevin has continued to be a friend to so many different pastors, and he still ministers, but this has just been a unique year. And what a blessing for me to be able to walk closely with him. But he continues to, gobs of pastors know him. He's pulled back a little bit, but he's still with the ministry and does a great job. But that's his season. And so some of it, there's guys that are in ministry that have lost spouses, and he's meeting with them, and and what God's doing with him now, he's pulled back a little bit, but God still uses. So it's just me and him. Yeah. It's been it used to be just Bob, and now it's me and Kevin.
Yeah. Wow. So when you're working with leaders, and I think this can be obviously situational, maybe even circumstantial. And I loved how you said, the difference between a 411 or 911 call, right? But there's always a disconnect from where they are and the reality of, where they are, but then also potentially where they want to be. What is your approach? And you'd mentioned maybe even some tools you talked about earlier. Maybe this is what that applies to within that. What is it that you start within those spaces of helping leaders determine what the process is moving forward to getting to what it is, maybe the vision, or maybe even the healing, whatever it is that they're needing? Where do you begin with them?
Yeah, well, I do. I don't do this with every person that I meet with. In fact, there's a couple of guys that I'm just processing. And I do find myself that they are, there's maybe a combination of both. Like I've met with pastors who are struggling with, I don't know if I want to do this forever. And then at the same time, they're also saying, what's next? And so there are folks that sometimes I'm helping them think about the transition, because I don't have a dog in the fight. So, I can talk to them as an individual at how they're feeling about those things. So there are times where I'm just processing them about making wise choices. Sometimes when there's different books that I would apply to different folks that might be talking to me about some of their doubts and stuff. So I use some books, and but one thing I do that I was, it's crazy. The original story is like, there was one time I was candidating, and I saw these 5 areas that they were talking about. And like, how do you keep yourself, spiritually and physically and relationally? And they had this question. I was like, so I do that. Well, I do that with the guys. So like, and this is not, high-end personality test stuff. I basically say, hey, get a card out and write these 5 words down. And how are you doing on a scale of 1 to 10? So the 5 areas are spiritual. You write the word down, spiritual. And then how are you doing emotionally? Yeah. And then the third one is, how are you doing physically? And I might explain that a little bit. And then how are you doing relationally? So that's family and close friends, And then how are you doing professionally? In other words, are you stretching and growing? And so scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing in each one of them? Write a number. And so then from there, here's something interesting. Again, I've only been doing this a year, and I have not yet met a person who, when I'm talking to them, the low score has been over this last year has always been emotional. And
Okay.
I haven't quite I don't have some theory or something like that, about that. But I think that's interesting. And I think some of the research from Barna last April, and then even some of the other recent activity, like with Pew and some other data, would bear those things out. One of the things from Barna that was really stark was the mental health of pastors. And I think it's just very complex in the church world, in churches today.
Yeah.
And
That's
so,
an understatement, but yes.
I know. It's incredibly
it's like crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I just speak to that just for a second?
Oh, absolutely.
I got enough to say about this.
Please do.
I think the complexities come from possibly, again, I'm just a Wayne County boy. All right. I'm not that complex, but I do think of two things that I think are complex to each person. And that is, one is the paradigm. In your church, the expectations of who you are. And if you caught a moving train, then the paradigm is you're leading from where the congregation or your ministry is. And what's expected in the paradigm. You can have a job description, but there's some paradigm inside of that. But then there's also just maybe unmentioned expectations.
Yeah.
And so there's a paradigm. And so many churches have these different paradigms of, for example, youth pastor. There's these unspoken expectations of youth pastors,
Yeah.
And then the second thing would be polity. Now, I know those are such lame words. Probably somebody would make fun of that. But the other, polity, is just so interesting because depending on where you are, there's a governance.
Yeah.
There's some accountability set up. And I think that in many, many churches, lay leaders are there, of course, to keep you accountable. But there's this polity that's in place that you're living under the authority. Like, for example, in my last church when I was a senior pastor, there were 18 people on the leadership team. 18. I was one of those 18, yes. But there were 4 elders, 4 trustees, and 4 finance or stewardship. And then you had 3 people assigned from the congregation. From the staff. I could assign 3. And then I was one, and you had a clerk. And you added up to the 18. And they were the ones who set the budget and everything. That's polity. And there was a lot that came with that in expectations, as well as the complexities of knowing and, expectations of how much you would know and all that kind of stuff. So there's other folks that are assigned by a superintendent and here's your assignment and you only answer to him. And if the church isn't happy, I guess they can call him, kind of thing. There's just all the polity of the governance. Francis Chan said a few years ago, he said, in America, I don't know how it is that as pastors, we follow the people we lead. And I know there's mutual submission. I know that there is this whole sense of the law of love. And I try my best to lead in that. But there is something about a leader who always has this sense that these guys could get together tonight and just release me. And there's how do you be a leader, but at the same time, you're really following them. They have the authority. And so I think all those complexities that's what localizes or individualizes what you're living through and the expectations and how you handle it and how people process that, and that's where I think I wrote this down probably about 6 months ago. We do have macro problems, based on data, but we need micro solutions. And part of that, I think, is the whole walking with folks. But, I love, for example, great book, The Resilient Pastor. Great book. It talks about the 6 different people you need to have in your life and all that stuff. That's great. I just think that it's really hard to define, like, the 5 bullets, So for me, in the tool shed, if I find somebody that, like, for emotionally or maybe spiritually, then we key in on that and we say, and again, a lot of this is 34 years of ministry here, I'm like, hey, have you thought about this? And then, I'm also listening to that, but also trying to key in on those areas. So to gain traction when folks may not know what they want to talk about that day, we just go and we say, how are you doing physically? Hey, are you getting exercise? How are you doing spiritually? And then we suss that out, and then there's times, like, for example, I recommend books. I've recommended a lot of different books depending on the area that they may be processing the most and trying to find traction in. So
I love that. I don't think your words were nerdy. I can't remember what you said. The paradigm poly, that's actually a really great way of framing that. Because when I think of even some of my own emotional and even spiritual strain, that's exactly where they point to. And I've mentioned this before. You talked about the unspoken. I would even add to the expectations that people hold for me in that role that they don't actually even hold for themselves. And how that plays into some of that dynamic, but then also within the polity and the governance and all the things. And then you take their background into all of that, and it becomes this wonderful mess, right? And and we get to serve in that. And so I think that's really profound.
I'll say something real quick here, just as you were speaking that and saying, it becomes a very complex issue. I think one of the important parts for me as a pastor, I don't know if I was a very good example of this, but as I came to be a senior pastor, I realized, whoa, there's a lot of people have a lot of opinions about this. I mean, we were in church of about 600 or 700, but it was funny. Okay. Yeah. They don't like, there's a lot of different reasons to maybe not be happy, kind of thing.
Sure.
And so it was so fascinating to me as I experienced that. And I finally came to the point where it's like, you know what? It goes, the Lord Jesus, my wife, the elders, and then I can be close to them, but I cannot, when our church grew to like 1,200, I mean, I love all of them, but not everybody gets to vote on, what I did right or wrong. I mean, I am accountable to my wife. I am accountable to the elders. And I think that helped me in my mind. I think you have to remember to and I'm going to, sorry, you get me going here.
Keep going, keep going.
There were times when I remember some of the first people that sat me down after I became a senior pastor were by far the most contentious, and they were the most unhappy. And so I remember there was one gentleman who wanted to do a hymn sing, and they had 9 people coming to it, and they didn't know why we weren't doing it in the big church and all this kind of stuff. And I remember I sat down with him. He wanted to talk again, and you're missing it, and you're not going to be long for this place, and blah, 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 and everything. And I remember he walked out the door, and as he walked down the hallway, I walked with him. And as he left the door, this sounds so, it's not as rude as it really sounds. But I remember thinking, I'm kind of glad he doesn't like what we do, because I don't think I could build a church around him. Like, do I want I'm okay with that. And that was not, listen, my wife bought Approval Addiction by Joyce Meyer. She set it on my bedside when it came out. All right. I mean, I am Approval Addiction guy. I am just unbelievable on the charts on that. So I think, I want everybody to love me, and I want to say all the right things, and I want to keep everybody happy, and don't leave my church, please, and all that. But man, I was kind of one of those moments like, yeah, I think we're good here.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, not that you want to gain any joy, and I don't think we should. No. None of that.
Sure.
But I do think, because the Lord can smell that out, haughtiness, pride, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But, you know, I just think coming back to a few people, folks that come every once in a while, I love them. And even people that might not even be walking with the Lord, I want to love them and be Jesus. But man, I cannot keep everybody happy. And so I choose a few. Man, who am I going to be accountable to?
Yeah.
And sometimes the complexities of how everybody feels, just being able to come back to a small group of elders and go, hey, man, guys, this was a hit and that was kind of offensive and everything, but, you know, I want you to pray about this. And then them saying, Johnny, encouraging me and affirming me, then I was like, okay, I can do this, you know. But if you're like, if 300 people have your attention and you're trying to keep everybody happy, that's the wheel you want to get off of. You want to just. And then I also think those authorities in your life are the places that you also need to take your cues from. And so I Bob Yauberg, my pastor, was the guy I was like, Bob, what do you think? And he would just, and I would listen to him more than I would a complaint, I even got to the point where somebody would say, oh, we got a card. I didn't want to show you this, but here, it's a complaint card about the thing. And I got to the point, believe it or not, Mr. Approval Addiction, I finally got to the point where I looked and I'd smile and I would read it, and it would kind of make me sad a little bit. And I would look at it and I go, only one out of 1,200 people?
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's good.
But you didn't have 900 of these.
Yeah.
So, sorry. Just keep perspective.
No, I think it's great. It's, it also helps keep you accountable to things and your own way of, the decision making and trust. And, we were actually, before you jumped on, we were talking about, so we had the weather issue here today, and we're recording this. This is March 5th. We were supposed to have a worship night tonight to kind of kick off a Lent season for us. Mm-hmm. And because of the weather, we're like, should we? I don't know. And rarely I'm the one that's pushing forward. Usually I'm like, oh, a night off or, that kind of a thing. And everyone else on the team has been like, I don't think it's a good idea. I'm like, well, just win now. It's not, but temperature, all the things. And so I'm like, I got to trust the team. And this is what we're going to do. And so we decided we're going to have it tomorrow night instead. So we're going to have Ash Wednesday on Thursday. Mm-hmm. But, it's kind of one of those things of like, checking me on what is it that I'm pushing forward in? Is it, but then also when it comes on the other side of that, and am I hearing just the vocal few, right? Versus, mm-hmm. People who actually can help me keep a pulse on what's actually going on and, model that. I think that's so healthy.
I had a friend of mine who was an associate pastor with me. He's now a senior pastor. And he said, Johnny, it's the 10-10-80 thing. And you guys have probably already heard this, but I had not heard it. He's like, 10% of your congregation are going to be early adopters, man. Mm-hmm. You say it, they'll do it. Yep. Hey, we're all in, let's do it. Right. And then there's going to be 10 people that are like, no matter what you say, it's a no.
Yeah. Right.
And then there's this 80% that are sort of, slow maybe to adopt, but it's this majority of people. And so you'd have to remember that you can't live in fear or, the folks that are going to say no matter what or resist the change. You kind of have to keep it in perspective and what the Lord's calling you to,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got to listen to the Lord first and foremost. And often that pushes you into the place of Like, are we going to go take the mountain? Are we going to go into the place where God's called us to go? Or are we going to sit around and watch it on the outside? And that's, I think you gave a lot of words to articulate where people may be feeling, especially around like the polity and those things. For me, I know that I often, there were problems, things that I saw or see, but I didn't have words to articulate or put it to it. And as you were explaining, I was like, yeah, that's the words. Those are the words that we as leaders need to hear so we can articulate it. So then we can say, oh, that's the problem. This is how we're moving forward in it. So.
Yeah, there's a couple little pieces of wisdom I would give inside of that I learned even when I was in my home church like 25 years ago. And I remember a guy said this. We were going to do something, and he could tell that just there was a lot of resistance. And he looked at me one day and he said, Johnny, we're not what we're becoming. And I don't really know exactly what that means. But the one thing I remember feeling at that moment was like, hey, look, be patient.
Yeah.
We might not do it today, but we're becoming that. It's just, you have to be patient as well. Another little nugget of wisdom that I remember being, and you guys know this, and if you're in ministry, people are down on what they're not up on. And I think there is it's about timing and having the wisdom and the right place to share those stretches, those places of growth, those new changes, and being able to, inside of your structure, inside of your ministry. I mean, in student ministry, for example, I always did that where I was trying to get ahead of the cycle. So if we started a new year and we were going to do something completely different next fall, like that, we've been praying about this, we're going to do this thing. Well, I started, talking to the leaders. First of all, the people, and most important, my life, my wife, and the other leaders that were over me knew, and we had processed this, interact before you act, kind of thing. Yeah. And then, from there, then exposure and do things in order. Don't, like the only time I did this was one time. By the way, I have a son who has autism, and I'd been the pastor there for several years, and God had kind of laid my heart for us to really have a special needs ministry. But I waited until he was at about 5 years old. I didn't do it when he was like, when he was diagnosed, because like, hey, dude, now you want to do it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I was in front of the congregation one Sunday morning. I was preaching a sermon about grace. And then this is so against the polity. Okay. So in the middle of the service, kind of towards the end of the service, I said, we are going to start a ministry for parents and children with special needs. And we're going to call it Grace Ministry. And we're going to do this. And I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to do it. Now, I had not talked to the elders. I had not talked to the leadership team, anybody. Yeah. But I was so passionate about it. I did that. Now, it was okay. But I think that's an exception to the rule. You should do it in order where your elders aren't surprised that you get some buy-in. And then also, you can't get too emotional. That's me. I would get so emotional about something. I get emotionally attached to an idea, and then like, oh, he squelched it. My senior pastor squelched my idea. We're gonna bungee from the top of the steeple. He won't let me. Kind of thing. But it's one of those things where I think you want to act under authority. Yeah. You want to use wisdom. You want to be clear and make sure that you kind of do things in order.
That's good.
I mean, just having somebody to walk alongside and start to talk through, because of the isolation for pastors, even if they're not isolated from people, we're around people all the time. For me, that's been a game changer. That's not like you said, you don't have a dog in the fight, so you can shoot straight. You're not.
And to be clear, you're talking about he's walking with you.
Yeah. So, but just that being a point of like, I think people need this. Pastors, leaders need somebody to know them, and process stuff with.
Yeah.
I think this is an area that I want to be like. There's not a lot of times I absolutely love. It was a long time ago when I was in my early 20s. So, but I just love sitting down with that young man, and I love, being able to walk alongside of them. I realize that it's kind of been different for me because, first of all, what do I do? Do I go stand out in the middle of the street or go to the local prayer gathering and go, hey guys, I'm available over here.
Right.
Hey, nobody knows me that well, but, and because there's all these denominational structures too. There are a lot of denominations that are offering structure and assistance as well as resources and guidance and all those things, including sabbatical and including even counseling. Mm-hmm. And so I realized that, that's true. What's interesting is I'm realizing that it's kind of like Jesus when he sent out the disciples and he said to them, go and find the man of peace. Mm-hmm. And, if they don't welcome you, shake the dust off and just move on and stay there as long as you're welcome, And so, I have experienced this where it's like, I think a lot of pastors need the, like you're saying, somebody to walk with them that have their best interest at heart. And that's one of the things I have to check about myself. This really isn't about me. I have my silly stories of how I met my wife and all these kinds of things that were so important to me. But I really want to meet folks and to walk with them where they are. There's just not too much I haven't heard that I cannot empathize. And the empathy is more important than how much I know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times where I feel like, oh man, I don't, this guy's got his doctorate. Here I am getting together with him,
sure.
My master's. And, but you know what, man, if you love people and you care about them. And so I think that's for me, and I think it's for other pastors too. I do think that you need to have someone that is out ahead of you. And I always say, get into their orbit, get into somebody's orbit, get around somebody and somebody you can talk to that's outside of that sphere of influence. Now, I would also say, make sure that they are wise. They are walking with the Lord, because you can get some bad advice pretty quickly these days.
Yeah.
But I think a friend, I think a sage, a pastor, I can't think of the categories. Please forgive me, from the resilient pastor. I just think you need to have that in your life. And so that's just an interesting observation I make, though, because not everybody is like, I know some people might look at somebody like me and like, hey, dude, I got enough friends. Okay. And I don't have enough time, so like, that kind of thing. But so you can't push yourself on other folks, but.
Yeah, but to the same thought, though, pastors can also be really good at isolating themselves, or not just pastors, ministry leaders, period. And so even to say, I don't know if, I've got enough friends, but,
Have you guys gone through the Barna report? Have you talked about this on your podcast?
No, not at all.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's some categories that, what do I see with leaders? It kind of mirrors a little bit. I could literally give you an example of each one of these, but here's what came out last year about pastors and what the data is showing. The pastor's identity and calling and confidence. The confidence in ministry and their calling is declining. And there's a lot of challenges they face sort of as a frontline worker. That's something they found. Another thing is the pastor's relationships and network of support. many of pastors feel very isolated, and they increase their isolation because they are hiding some of their problems or some of the things that they are struggling with. So it's very important. That's why this constellation of relationships is what they talked about out of this study. But having mentors and peer networks, but what they're finding is pastors are becoming more and more isolated. And they found when the same thing, the pastor's mental health was a big issue, which was very, very sad. Some of the statistics, some of the numbers were really sad, but it's struggling with emotional exhaustion, isolation, and also kind of underlining or underscoring the importance of seeking professional help with trauma and wounds. And that's something that happens in ministry. I'm not trying to be dramatic, but you know what, man, when you face rejection on a pretty good scale, or if you go through public trauma where you've been rejected by a congregation or things have been said, that is very, very hard. And so what does that do to pastors? Zip the lip. Don't talk to anybody. And even while everybody else is gossiping, you be quiet. And that increases that isolation. And so, I think that's the credibility of pastors as well is something that they found in this report in the numbers. And what I mean by that is a decreased trust in institutions and the credibility of pastors, especially what we have kind of walked through, even in the past 10 years for sure, but like even the last year or two. And so that's a reflection for non-believers. Like I have extended family who don't know the Lord. Every time somebody falls, they go, what in the world? What's going on? And I think there's a mixture of issues for pastors where I think it's really important to stay connected to some people and as well, here's my thing. So many times we think of it as right and wrong. We think of everything as right and wrong. And the truth is what's healthy and what's wise is also important. Do the healthy thing. What would be the healthy thing? Well, the healthy thing would be to get some help or to have somebody to walk with you. The wise thing would be to gain wisdom and grow. And so that the Barna shows that, like what you were talking about there, Brenton, of just like how walking with somebody is really important. Sometimes what's going on in church world actually works against it.
Right.
Yeah.
I know just even for myself, I had to come to a place of if I don't reach out to somebody, I will not be doing this. What God's calling me to do. I need to find, and so started going through some of those through our mutual friend, Bill, who's been on the podcast before. And I said, I think I need to reach out to somebody and just get some help in some areas to begin to process some things. And he immediately suggested that I start talking with you. And it's been a game changer. My whole outlook has just changed just because I verbalized some of the things that are internally happening. And that was like, I see this from a different perspective and have some insight into things. So,
what's funny, Brenton, if you're anything like me, maybe I'm just the odd bird. It's so interesting because when I see young pastors, especially like yourself, he
calls you young.
Yeah, he is to me. So it was interesting. It's like, I believe in you so much more than you would believe in you naturally. It's so interesting. I'm like, I've had to think about that for myself. Like what, why am I not more confident in the Lord? Or why am I not more bold in certain ways? And I see others. So I think that's where sometimes when we see ourselves, we the enemy wants us to back down, be isolated, be worn down emotionally, and God is calling us to a higher place. And so I really think that's very insightful. I think we really need to kind of look around, and find folks. I've been fascinated. There were a couple of guys that have really large churches. And so when we were going through COVID, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what to do. I mean, I just was like, I don't even know how to handle this. Yep. So I called a couple of guys. I was shocked at how open they were to getting together with me. I was like, really? And, that was very healthy. And it was also wise. It wasn't that I was taking all my cues, but I was able to process and to, like you're saying, someone to listen and to gain wisdom and also, process with. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. I don't think that makes you odd. I think most anybody listening would go, yep, I don't see it. And that's why we need each other to be able to call those things out.
Yeah.
In us. Yeah. That's good.
That's right.
This has been so helpful, insightful. We'll get you out on this one thing. Specifically, even maybe speaking to what you just mentioned with the Barna report and where pastors are at, and especially those that you've been walking with and as you're walking through that kind of a thing. Ministry is tough. It can be tough on leaders. So what encouragement or hope would you want to pass along today to them?
This past year, I have really realized that it was even through a book that I read, but it's something my wife and I are discovering more and more of. And that is that in the book of Ezekiel, the river of life, and then Jesus saying, I am the river of life. I'm the living water, that same term, that living water, never thirst again. And then the book of Revelation, there's this, this living water, this river of life. And the truth is that is the promise of God. That song, I've got a river of life flowing out of me, the old camp song that's probably 100 years old or whatever. And we sing that and everything. But the truth is most times we're like, I've got a little puddle of God somewhere down there. I don't know where it is right now, but I'm going to go find it sometime. And the truth is the Lord has held nothing back from us. He's held nothing back. We have the Word. We have His Spirit inside of us. And He has called us to such a time as this. I think in the last 5 years, there's been times where I've doubted, like, holy cow, I'm very uncertain. And when you live in uncertainty, I think there's a lot of confusion and chaos. And so I would just encourage, one of the things I'm just learning is to live in the presence of God, to know that there's no place I can go where He is not, and that He knows exactly where I am. He knows what's going on in my life, and He's got a call on my life. I remember a pastor named Wellington Boone. One time he was speaking to a small group of us, and he said, we pray, Lord, use us. We came to the Lord, like, Lord, just use me, Lord. I'll go anywhere, I'll do anything. And then when it happens, and we get through ministry and everything, and we get in our office after a very hard time, and we go, oh, Lord, I just feel so used. I just feel all used up. Yes. The truth is, you need times of refreshing. You do. Yeah. And there may be a season of help and walking with, but God's got a call on your life. And that the same God that called you, you are God's workmanship created for good works in Christ. You went from a mess to a masterpiece. And so I would encourage pastors today that Jesus said over and over, and as well as in the Old Testament it's found, I will never leave you nor forsake you. And just the Lord is with you. And we live in a day when He's held nothing back. We have more at our disposal with the Word of God, with every help, with every kind of even books, ministries, and everything, do the healthy thing and do the wise thing. And because God's got a call in your life, and it's for such a time as this. Yeah. Don't grow weary. Galatians 6:9. Galatians 6:9. Live in it.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. I'm encouraged. That's awesome.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Thank you. Johnny, this has been great. Thank you for being so gracious with your time. And thank you for your ministry and what you're doing. It is so valuable and important. And we will make ways available in the show notes for people to get connected with you and what you're doing there. And man, thank you.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you, Brenton. Appreciate you guys and what you're doing.
Well, thank you for joining us again for another episode of Ministry Without Hating It. We hope it's helped you take a step further towards loving what you do through the wisdom of others. If you'd like to connect with our guest further, we've made ways to do so available in the episode show notes. And if you'd like to connect with us further, support the podcast, or sign up for any show updates, just go to withouthatingit.com to get started. And don't forget to subscribe to Ministry Without Hating It wherever it is that you get your podcast so you don't miss out on our future episode releases. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.